Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Switch Statement Podcast. It's a podcast for investigations into miscellaneous tech topics.
This is episode 7 in our series on the art of game design by Jesse Schell.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hey, Matt. I am doing really, really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I learned that the one thing that I'm missing from my life is getting to watch Einstein play the violin, perform for me as an old person in a nursing home.
Can you imagine seeing, first of all, just witnessing Einstein? I mean, what a legend.
That by itself would have been incredible, regardless. Like, even if he was just like, I don't know, sneezing. Like, I would have loved that experience. But
Yeah. No, I saw Paul McCartney bust his own tray at a Hampton Chutney one day, and it was like, it's literally like a core memory for me now.
Wow.
Paul McCartney cleaning up his own dosa.
That makes me feel better. Like, that makes me appreciate Paul McCartney more than, knowing that he,
Oh, yeah.
he's just one of us.
My respect for Paul McCartney went from infinity to like two-finity.
Two-finity.
Yeah, it's larger than infinity. But going back to the Einstein thing, like, yes, that would be just utterly incredible to see him. But I had this one thought while I was reading that section that, like, what if you're in that audience and you were excited to hear him talk about physics? You're waiting like, oh man, I'm gonna hear the great Einstein talk about physics, and then he busts out a violin and starts playing.
Yeah, although the reality of that is, like, there were probably a bunch of other opportunities. Like, if you were alive at that time, you may have been able to get him talk, or watch him talk about physics.
Yeah.
You were never going to be able to coordinate watching this guy play the violin. So
That is very true. Yeah, to hear him talk about physics on another occasion, but for now, just be blessed with his violin playing. I wonder what he played. I wish they had given a little bit more detail.
yeah, it's probably one of those facts that's lost to history. Although it's great that they have the picture there.
Yeah,
Him
that's awesome.
fiddling away. Yeah, he probably did like a hoedown.
That's what I was thinking. He's just playing like a jig up there, like kind of tap dancing around. That would be.
I think so.
That would be incredible. I like this section. I might be jumping ahead a little bit because my notes are terrible, but I like this section about what men like versus what women like.
Dude, this got a little spicy.
Yeah.
This got a little,
Some controversy.
Yeah,
I like
I
how
know.
I love how, like, women, when he's going through what women like, it's all these like complex things that involve like deeply, deep emotion or, deeply thinking about things. And then what men like, it's like destruction.
domination.
Yeah.
Like,
It's these like very simplistic things, which is so true. I mean, when I think about what I like in games, like hearing characters talk about their whatever they're going through or something is so boring to me. But like blowing up a mountain, I mean, that's legit.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It is interesting because he said a sentence that I really believe. He says, some people would prefer to dodge the entire question of gender-based play and act as if these large group patterns don't exist.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that is really common. Like, no one wants to say that there's any difference in behavior.
It seems like especially like today. I mean, maybe I'm just older and I'm aware of these things now, but it seems like this mentality has only gotten more intense to just actively disregard or not discuss or not acknowledge differences.
Yeah. And I think, and then he goes on to say, but to do so would be to deny reality, which is a dangerous thing for a designer to do. So it's like, I think we need to be able to comment on patterns that we see, like acknowledge patterns that we see without trying to like vilify that practice in and of itself. It's like,
Yeah.
let's say these patterns do exist. Let's say, yeah, like he says something that I don't know if it's true. Like I don't know what his evidence to back it up is. He says that men are better at spatial puzzles. Is that true? I have no idea. But I think that we need to be able to entertain the idea that it is true. And like, I think there's a large class of people who would just reject that idea on its face, because if it were true, that would be like uncomfortable.
Right.
You know?
Which I do think he also mentioned that men like playing Call of Duty or whatever, and women don't really play Call of Duty. And I think that's a cultural thing. This is just my assumption. But, men are brought up, and war is like a thing for men, and fighting generally is a thing for little boys, and guns and stuff. And I think a lot of this stuff is cultural. I would even go so far as to say the spatial puzzles thing is like a little bit cultural. I would guess that if you just take a male brain and a female brain, their innate ability to figure that type of thing out is probably similar. But I think Legos are like a little bit more popular with boys, and just spatial things generally are like a little bit more popular with boys.
Yeah. And this is his point, is like, we don't need to come up with a grand unified theory of like, nope, it's genetics and boys and girls are different, in order to call out that we are seeing this pattern. And regardless of how we got here, it's still affecting the kinds of games that these kinds of users like to play.
Yeah. I also noticed, I'm sure that his generalizations, they are generalizations, so obviously they're not going to be true in all cases. Because I noticed my own self, like, I do not like games that are hyper competitive, and I also do not like that kind of dominate. Like, later in the chapter, he mentions Bartle's I just threw a B in there for some reason. Bartle's taxonomy, where he mentioned killers, people who like to absolutely dominate you in games. And I have met a lot of dudes, mostly dudes, like that when playing like Halo and stuff. That has like never brought me joy. I sometimes like the same games. For instance, I like chess, which I think we've discussed before. But I think I like it for just completely different reasons. Because I've noticed a lot of chess players, they enjoy that feeling of mentally dominating. I've even heard people say that they enjoy that. Like, I blew that guy to pieces. You know, his brain is worse than mine. But that's just not, it's just not what I like about it. And then I also noticed in the women proclivities, I actually really like some of those things, like nurturing. I'm a huge fan of games where you have to like grow like a little puppy and, play with it and stuff. So I think there's a ton of crossover, which, I mean, he even says that they're generalizations, but
it's so funny because there was a point where he talks about women have this like loss aversion, and his description of like the way women think about loss aversion is something that I have said about myself many times. It's like, I hate losing way more than I like winning. And so, but I also don't think that means that the generalization is wrong. Like, I think any one person, for any person, some of these generalizations are probably not going to hold. So,
right. I really like the style of games like Factorio, where you're like building, you're building a factory. You're basically building things that produce things and passing them into other factories. I couldn't exactly tell where that fit in these, because he mentioned that women enjoy playing Farmville. And I was thinking Farmville seems kind of similar to those style of games. But I couldn't fit that style of games into these taxonomies.
Yeah. Let's see.
So he mentions a new lens, the lens of the player, which is basically like, you got to be empathetic. You got to put yourself in the shoes of who you're making the game for. And this is interesting because, like, when I look at the way that I've attempted to be creative in the past, I'm almost always making something that I would enjoy.
Yes.
And I have tried to make things that I would enjoy at like different phases in my life. Like I enjoy writing. I'm a terrible writer, but I really enjoy it. And I feel like when I'm writing, I am writing stuff that I would have enjoyed like 10 years ago, or maybe even like 20 years ago. Because I think it's too hard for me to write something that I would enjoy today. It just requires much more writing skill than I think I'm capable of. But I did think it's interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just thought that whole concept of writing a book that women would enjoy, or writing a book that an old person would enjoy, just doing something that's completely outside of my life experience. I think I might be not even capable of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that for a first game, I think it does make sense. It's like, okay, make yourself the target audience, because then you don't need to do this additional research work, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think it offers a really interesting challenge. And he goes into this anecdote with, there was this Disney Quest game, and I don't know if this is in the next chapter, but he talks about how Disney wanted a game that could, like, the whole family could play. And it was kind of fascinating because through this the systematic analysis, he was like, okay, the kids are going to do this, the dad is going to do this, and then the mom is going to do this other thing, these specific roles, because, okay, just to take a step back, like, this is this space battle or something where, someone needs to pilot the ship and other people need to shoot. And they were basically like, yeah, the game is essentially designed with the mother as the driver, like the father and the kids are going to be shooters.
Yeah.
And like, we designed the game around those assumptions, and like, it was a big success because the fact that we took into account how these players are going to slot, like, and then designed, because like, then it becomes a challenge of like, okay, if we see that the driver of the boat is generally a middle-aged woman, like, now we should design the interface for, with that in mind. Like, she's not playing a bunch of video games, so we need to design it so that she feels comfortable and is able to drive well. And I thought that was amazing, because I feel like too. I would always just design in a vacuum, as though like any interface, like any player could do anything and the interface should just work for all of them. And it's like, obviously it won't, it'll be it'll be geared towards probably me,
Right.
I just design it for myself in all the cases. And so it really got me thinking about, like, yeah, I mean, if we're thinking about our game, what are the kind of players that, is it more geared towards men or women? I don't know. Do you have a sense?
I was thinking about that too, because our game has roles, and there's not, well, I shouldn't say there's not a lot of games with roles, but like, in a lot of games, everyone is like a similar type of thing. They're doing similar tasks and they have similar goals. But in our game, we have this role where you're like controlling the gods, which is just this like completely, different thing from what the other players are doing.
Yeah.
And
do you think men would gravitate towards the god or
it's interesting.
meta-god?
Yeah, like, I think there's definitely an aspect of, domination and power and maybe destruction that maybe men would enjoy about controlling the gods, but there's probably also this aspect of like management, almost like kind of like a Farmville type thing, where it's like we're almost building a real-time strategy where there's like a prayer resource and you can spend it and all that, and maybe that would be something that would appeal to a female audience. But I don't know. I almost feel like I don't know enough about this. Like, all I know about this was in this chapter. So it's very it's hard for me to say how our game would resonate with males or females.
Yeah, it's definitely a very creative role. I think the god. Well, one of the things I like about it is anyone can play it the way they want to play it. So different meta gods are going to do it in different ways. So like, you could be a little bit like from the side. Maybe you don't like, maybe you're a little bit mysterious, or maybe you're like pretty on the nose and it's
Yeah.
like someone prays and this god likes them, so I'm just going to do whatever they ask for, you know.
No, I really like that aspect of it because it will change, the other player's experience as well. Just the personality of the person who is the gods.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
But yeah, in a way, I think that's a lot of pressure. So I do think that you need a very specific kind of person who is willing to take on that unique, because you stand apart. You're,
Yeah.
you're kind of unique. It's like the clue giver in
And
code names.
Yeah, so
So,
much
like,
pressure.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, if you've never played it before and you're not the kind of person who likes to kind of get up in front of people, it can be a little bit intimidating to play that role. So I think that's one thing for us to keep in mind. That
Yeah. That's a super good point. We need to make sure to kind of, not minimize the responsibility, but make it a little bit less anxiety inducing. Because
yeah,
there's a game that I've been playing recently. I really like it. I can't remember what it's called, unfortunately. But basically, you're a ghost and you're trying to have other people solve these murders. And the way that you communicate with them is by handing them like paintings, just these weird abstract paintings. And so basically, you'll be trying to get them to guess like a person's face, and you'll hand them like an abstract painting. That's the only way you can communicate with people.
wait. So there's a human player that's the ghost, and there are other human players that are trying to figure out the mystery. Is that how it works?
Exactly.
Okay.
And like, I'll just use a concrete example. Like, say you're trying to get a player to guess this like mansion. Like, there'll be a picture of a mansion and then like a picture of a shed. And you have a painting. You have 7 paintings in your hand, and one of the paintings might be like a pile of money. And you're like, oh, if I give him this pile of money, he'll think mansion because it's worth more. But at least for me, it's like a lot of pressure to be the ghost and to like try to think of, oh, how is this player going to interpret this painting? And it's a great game. It's super well designed, but it definitely has this aspect of just anxiety if you're playing as the ghost, and you have to do it the whole entire game. So it's like your entire experience. Like, at least in code names, you're kind of swapping, off and on.
Yeah.
Usually, you're usually only the clue giver for like a few minutes at a time. So we need to keep that in mind for our game, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that raises another point, and this isn't the point of these chapters, but how long do you think you would want this game to be?
I really want to keep it just to a good length of time, like a half hour, maybe like 40 minutes. Because I feel like anything beyond that.
So that's quick, like a half hour. That's faster than I thought.
Yeah, and I think when we were originally talking about this, I was thinking it would be like a much longer game.
Epic.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, I don't personally have the attention span for games that are super long.
Yeah.
So I think it might be better to try to keep it short if we can, or at least try to trim down mechanics that, are making the game longer.
That's interesting because I guess we might need to. It might mean we need to trim the scope of the things that you can possibly do.
Yeah, I think so. Which might be good because I feel like, right now our conception of the game has like a lot of disparate mechanics,
Yeah.
and we're gonna have to make sure those all interact well and synergize, or whatever. And I do think that just straight up minimizing the number of mechanics is a good way to simplify, like make the game easier to design.
Yeah. And I'm just remembering now that we said we were going to talk about our risks, and
Yes.
I don't think we came up with specific prototypes, but it's like I think this is one crucial risk, is that none of these mechanics are going to kind of work well together, and I think maybe in a way, before we make any of the art or do any like design how anything looks, we might want to like just prototype the raw, like, okay, these are four gods, like just start to put, make a simple prototype, which is like, okay, these gods, these players, this board size, and then like start to play test that.
Yeah, we need to fire up Board Game Simulator and just start messing around.
Yeah, so I think that would be the big first prototype we should make, is like, just uber simple tokens, and put together a skeleton, and like, okay, skeleton rules, straw man rules, and then without trying to dive deep into, like, I don't know, coming up with a billion different like player roles, or like 7 different like player roles that have buffs, and what's the opposite of a buff? Like
a nerf.
A nerf, buffs.
I don't know.
Nerfs.
Yeah, we used to always say nerf whenever something got less powerful in a video game.
Yeah. So then that's our homework for next time.
Let's get on like a multiplayer tabletop simulator session and just like mess around, because I've never played tabletop simulator, so I kind of want to check it out.
Yeah.
I wrote down a couple other things for chapter 9. He had a section on psychographics, which funnily enough, I did not write down the definition of that, but he had a couple of things where he basically called out like facets of people, almost like a tagging system, like dog lovers is an example of this. And I thought that was an interesting way to think about, designing a game, is going on Facebook and just seeing which of these tags have the most people, and like, oh, let's make a game for dog lovers because there's a lot of dog lovers out there.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I think that this just like didn't register. I think I just skipped to the taxonomy of game pleasures, which is interesting because it seems like it's nested within psychographics, but that feels kind of orthogonal to I guess, how did you view the LeBlanc's taxonomy of game pleasures as relating to psychographics?
Well, I don't remember what psychographics even means. I should have written down the definition, but it did seem like it was an exercise in kind of labeling people with like a bunch of facets of their personality. And the taxonomy, like LeBlanc and Bartle's taxonomies were both these kind of series of labels. So maybe that's how they're related, but I don't know. I mean, I should have written down the definition of psychographics. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you said is as precise a definition as he gives, as far as I can tell. It's literally just a way to segment the population, or even like you're saying, like label the population with like things that they like.
Yeah,
it's like demographics, which are age and gender and ethnicity. So those are like one side, and then I guess if it's you're kind of, if demographics are segmenting the population by these like immutable attributes, then psychographics are more like these malleable attributes that anyone could be interested in,
right.
Which is like they like basketball, or like, I don't know, they love traveling or something like that.
Yeah, which I don't know. I thought this was interesting. Jesse Schell is very good at just mentioning a lot of different angles, or I always want to use the word lenses, but I like try to avoid it. But he just mentions all these lenses that you can look at making games, and psychographics is something that I just haven't really thought about. Just that whole notion of like, oh, I know there's a lot of this type of person out there, like someone who enjoys travel, like you just said. It's like, how could I design a game that would satisfy someone like that? I'm almost never thinking along those lines when I'm thinking about what type of games to develop.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, as we've discussed before, I think both of us, like, the process of designing a game is very like, it's just by your gut.
Yeah.
You're like, this seems cool.
Right.
It's never this like very precise, because I feel like it's almost like a business thing where the times when this would be useful is you've identified an unmet segment of the population who you think would really want a game.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you kind of like, okay, what kind of pleasures does that tranche of humans enjoy? And then we'll design a game that, induces those sorts of pleasures.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what this section made me think of, is like, that's a way, I mean, that's probably a very successful way to go about making games, is to basically start with like a known psychographic.
Population. Yeah.
And just kind of go from there. But anyway, I thought this...
But I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard
Yeah.
to do that, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's like focus groups and, people who spend a lot of resources trying to identify that like untapped demographic.
Yeah.
LeBlanc and Bartle's taxonomies, the only thing I wrote down out of those taxonomies was Bartle's killers, which are like the dominating type people. And I've definitely seen a lot of those type of people. I am not one. But
Although this is interesting because he also says that healing is, healers are in the killers category, which is slightly confusing to me.
yeah, that was weird. I wonder if this is games like, like Team Fortress, where everyone has a role. Most people are killing. I mean, that's like the whole objective of the game. But Team Fortress does have like a medic role.
Yeah.
That, you're very much involved in this act of like annihilation, but you're like playing this support role, and everyone likes you because you're like helping them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just part of the whole thing.
Man, Team Fortress is crazy because it's just amazing to me that none of the characters that they have, they're these awesome characters. None of them are women. Like, it's just wild to me that, like, it's like, just make half of it, like, just,
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe this is I'm stereotyping because I'm thinking about the medic, like, as a woman, but it's like Pokemon was in 1998, and like 3 out of the 8 gym leaders are women, and it's like, yeah, it's like maybe more boys than girls are playing Pokemon, but it's like we're gonna make half of the gym leader, like half of the opponents, women, just because, like, I don't know, it seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's like crazy to me that Team Fortress 2, like, nope. Literally, there are no women anywhere in the whole game. It's like wild.
Yeah, man. No, I feel like
Did
I mean, because the original Team Fortress, which I don't know if Team Fortress 2 was like taking the same characters from the original Team Fortress, but that game was made so long ago, and there was like a long period in gaming where they did not care about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like Contra is like these 2 beefy dudes, like I feel like these days, well, maybe those types of games still get made. Like Gears of War was kind of like that. But there's women in Gears of War. There's like,
Yeah.
other female soldiers and stuff. But
But like, what was I gonna say? Like Metroid,
oh yeah, my favorite game.
but one of the most badass like protagonists of all time.
Yeah.
Like a woman, because it's in the future and it's like, I don't know, she's on some other random ass planet. Like, why does that need to be a man? You know what I mean? So
Totally. No, Metroid, I mean, that game's just genius in so many different ways.
all right, well, I'll get off my like, and this is not, I'm not usually like all like representation, but I was just thinking about how like
Oh,
it
it's
seems
crazy.
wild, but-
Yeah, no, I think it's wild. You have a game with like, I don't know, 7 or 8 distinct
different
characters,
characters.
and just literally none of them is a female.
Well, this is the other thing is like this was in what was it like Team Fortress 2 came out in like 2005 or something, which like sure, I mean like maybe things weren't as woke as they are today, but it's like it still seems like late enough for
they should have been
them
thinking
to like
about.
at least put 2 I don't know, like a couple of women in there,
Yeah.
but
But anyway, yes, I guess we can move on to chapter 10 because our goal was to cover 9 through 11, right?
yeah, I think so.
So chapter 10, I barely wrote down anything. First of all, I wrote down that he got me with that toast thing, which annoyed me.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was interesting. He mentioned
Before we move on, like just maybe we should explain like what.
No,
or
let's just,
should we just leave it as like a completely mysterious like?
Let's just
the
refer to it
toast
as the
thing. It's a
toast
classic.
thing and move on. And
But it's all about leading players' expectations. Where you say like, all right, spell the word boast 5 times, say the word boast 3 times, and then the final thing is what do you put into toaster? And so like, of course, everyone will say toast, and you actually put bread in a toaster.
yeah, toast
Joke's
is
on you.
toast is what you take out of a toaster.
Yeah. We can get this, but I have like a class of word, which is it's a verb. And then when you do the verb, you produce the noun that matches the verb. So for example, toast.
Oh,
When you toast something, you get toast. So I don't know. I like there's probably a name for
Milk?
that, but when you milk something, you get milk, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a perfect example. So there's a bunch of these.
I
but
do love that. I feel like that just demonstrates a complete lack of creativity. Like, oh yeah, how
I
do
like
you get
it.
milk?
Every verb
Milk.
should be that. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
like
no, it's so much easier.
yeah.
It's weird when there's verbs that produce something that's just completely unrelated to the verb, which I can't even think of an example of that right now. But I guess if you need never mind, because you need dough.
Well, this gets into the hilarious like complexity of language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, what about? Do you fletch an arrow? I don't know. You're a fletcher.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's a very good example because, like, what the hell is fletching?
Yeah.
Oh, it produces arrows. Like, why are those? Because I guess fletching is the act of putting it's the act of making arrows, I think, but it's also the act of putting the fletching in the arrow, which is like the feathers on the back.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. Like, but I have a very cursory understanding of arrow making.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the whole thing that I am almost entirely unaware of. I thought this chapter was interesting, though. This chapter reminded me of Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a book about how weird the brain is and how easy it is to kind of like trick the brain into like feeling a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I felt like this whole chapter was kind of like, or at least this was my interpretation of the chapter, is like leading the brain down certain paths. Almost like hacking the brain a little bit, like keeping someone in a flow state because like that's the most pleasurable state.
Yeah, it seems like a really hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
Like, just because how do you take into account different ability levels and like awareness? And he talks about this where it's like this is a moving target, because if a playtester plays your game once, like, and then they play it play it again, it's like 2 different players. Well, no, it's actually like 2 totally different experiences.
Yeah.
And the flow variable is going to be completely different.
It's interesting because one thing I don't think he mentioned in this chapter was he shows these flow diagrams, and basically the way the diagram works is there's this bad triangle in the lower right corner and a bad triangle in the upper left, and there's this nice,
Stripe.
path, like a stripe, a nice stripe that you want to keep the player inside. So you want the player to like both improve at the game but also be more challenged by the game, so that they're constantly moving up and to the right in this stripe. He didn't mention how to like expand the width of the stripe, which seems like something that would be very beneficial.
Well, isn't that intrinsic to the player?
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like it's both. Because, for example, a game that has, like, let's say a game that has, like, really, really interesting graphics. I'm just using, like, a completely random example. Like, is that a way of growing the stripe a little bit? Because you're just holding people's interest, like, a little bit more, almost like intrinsically your game is, like, holding people's interest a little tiny bit more because it's just slightly more interesting to look at. So that stripe is, like, kind of broadened a little bit. And I don't know if this is true.
Are you, like...
Because the lower right corner of the diagram is boredom, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't want people to get into boredom, and you also don't want, what is the upper left stripe? I can't remember. Is it like feeling Anxiety, right? Like feeling completely defeated and deflated. So you basically don't want the players to end up in either of those realms. And it seems like it would be a super beneficial exercise to try to expand that trough.
I think if you're viewing the stripe as the part of the graph at which point the user is still playing your game, and if they get into either the boredom tier or the anxiety tier, they will stop.
Right.
I think I would agree with you that the game can expand expand that stripe, because maybe there are other things that and it's interesting because I would guess that those would increase uniformly, right? It's like something that increases the amount of boredom you will accept also probably increases the amount of anxiety you would accept.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's the case. And it's just interesting because I agree that this whole concept of like, I mean, he calls it a flow state, which I thought was interesting because I just think of that as something, I don't know, like I think I just think about that differently. But yeah, definitely that whole challenge versus, player skill, or how much the player has grown, seems like something that's so important to a game. Because I've definitely had games where, I play it for a couple hours and I just start feeling bored and I just stop playing it entirely. And I've always wondered why that is. And I think it's just because, the designers of the game have not designed that stripe well enough. Like they've designed it in such a way that I've fallen into the boredom category. Like I think my stripe is very narrow these days because I barely have any time. So I have like no patience for like a game that doesn't hold my interest. And
Yeah. I think games like Pokemon actually have a really good answer for this question, where if something is so difficult as to be frustrating, you can almost always just grind until you're good enough to get by the next, get it past the next point.
Yeah.
And I think they do a good job of like, okay, pretty much everyone's going to fall within this range of levels at this point in the game. And then there's only like let's say they're at this lower level, in the spectrum, they'll have to grind for, I don't know, an hour max to get back into the like flow level.
Yeah.
And then they can kind of go on. And then now, like once you get past that, like, you have a rough bounds on like what their level is. So like now and it's kind of an ingenious technique, I would say.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, the ability to kind of like level up your character is, I mean, I don't know when that innovation was made in gaming, but it's super genius. It also it's a testament to how well designed games are where you can't level up. Like you basically have the same character with the same controls throughout the entire game, but you're still, in that band. That just feels like a very difficult thing to do. Like Mario is an example where it's like, you're never gaining more like health. I mean, I guess if you get a mushroom, you get like an extra hit or whatever. But the game it's a testament to the game's design, I think, that, they don't have like a leveling system.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it seems like there would be a bunch of hacks for like, enabling the player to endure a little bit of boredom in order to kind of artificially raise their skill level. But there's just some games that like don't use any of those hacks. Yeah.
I saw a really cool diagram, which was how to make an open world game that doesn't just completely throw people into something that they're not ready for at all.
Yeah.
And I think this was in regards to Elden Ring, and it was kind of this like wheel. It was kind of a wheel shape where the player starts in this little dungeon, and they have a linear section that they have to get through. So they start in section A, they go through section B, which is like just like this tutorial chamber or something, and then you're in this like hub, and then so this is like level C, and like the letters indicate like how high of a level a player needs to be in order to like succeed at that level, right?
Yeah.
Like, so then from C, there's like D's branching off in all directions. And then from D's, there's like E's. And then from E's, there might be like F's or G's or whatever. And then like, and it's so cool because like, yeah, you can explore, like it feels very open-ended. But like,
Right.
in order to get to level G or, you know, F, you need to have gone through the other. It's not like you waltz out of the tutorial dungeon and like you can just take a left turn into a G and get insta-killed by like some super monster. But
Which is hilarious because that's exactly what Elden Ring does. Like you come out of the intro dungeon and there's this like dude on a horse who just like destroys you. You don't have to fight him, but it's just funny because that's exactly what they do.
That's funny. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I wrote down a couple other notes. Like I thought it was interesting that they teach chess at West Point.
I wonder if that's still true. Like,
Yeah, it's like what
guess.
does chess have to do with, I don't know, warfare? You know, besides the, I don't know. I guess that is the kind of aesthetic of the game, but other than that, it doesn't seem to have much in common.
Yeah.
Can't imagine you're on the battlefield and you're like, I know how a knight moves, therefore
Yeah.
I can
Just like,
flank
all
these
right,
tanks.
get my horses. Like, we need.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. He talks about modeling, and I guess I'm not really sure how we're supposed to use that. Like, is the idea that we take the real world, for example, and then we try to create a little like simulacra of that, or a simulacrum of the real world in a way that like it gets people's brains working. Like Charlie Brown is recognizable as a person,
Yeah.
but like it's kind of cut down of all of
Yeah, this section was
complexities.
interesting. Like it seemed to me like he was saying Werner Herzog, who's one of my favorite film directors, he talks about this thing called the ecstatic truth, where it's not actual reality, but it's like the most important version of reality for the viewer. And I think he used this phraseology referring to Grizzly Man, where it was true. I mean, everything in that documentary is like true, but there were certain things that he either, glazed over or he focused on because he thought it was like the ecstatic truth of the story. It was the most important reality that the viewer needed to experience. And I feel like I don't know, this section made me think of that concept, which I've always thought is such an amazing concept. One of the reasons Werner Herzog is amazing.
It's interesting because I guess, yeah, you can imagine a story that tells only truths.
Yeah.
That's still incredibly misleading. I'm not saying that that's what Werner Herzog
Oh, totally.
is doing.
Well, and I think Werner Herzog would even acknowledge that, because even when he's doing a quote unquote documentary, he admits that he's trying to make the viewer feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Which I think every documentarian is doing, and some of them won't admit it. Some of them will say, "Oh, I'm just covering the facts." And it's like, no, you're not. Like, you have an agenda. Like, everyone has a little bit of bias and a little bit of an agenda, and Werner Herzog just acknowledges that.
Well, I mean, for better or for worse, like maybe this is like an oxymoronic, but the documentary is going to have a narrative, and
Yeah.
like you're going to include things that support the narrative, and you're not going to include things that don't support the narrative, so like, and that's basically what it is, I think.
Yeah. Man, there is a hilarious quote. It's a Werner Herzog quote where he was sitting with a panel of like other documentarians, and it is like one of the funniest filmmaker quotes of all time, and I was just trying to Google and find it really quickly, but I can't find it. He's sitting like there's this other documentarian, I can't remember his name, but he's famous for making these movies that are just literally he'll just set a camera up in like a hospital, and he won't cut it. You know, when he's in the cutting room, he'll just like leave long periods of like nothing's happening, and it's called Cinema Verite or something like that. I can't remember the name for it. But anyway, there was a panel where Werner was sitting with this guy, and he just said the most hilarious thing about him, but I can't remember it. Great story.
All right, yeah. So one of the things I was gonna say is like I think for this game, and yeah, if you find it, we can you can say it. For this game, I think we can actually use modeling to our advantage because I think we can look at real world examples of problems that a community needs to solve when they're getting set up. It's like maybe we read about the history of Jamestown or something like that, and it's like, okay, they needed to like set up some irrigation ditches and like, I don't know, the latrines, and find a place for their horses to graze. And so maybe we find this super high resolution detailed account of what they actually had to do, and then we can use that to inform this hyper simplified kind of version of that.
Yeah, I like that.
Did you find it?
No, I have not found it. I think he calls the guy his enemy.
The
Truth of Accountants. Yeah. Cinema Verite is devoid of verite. It reaches a merely superficial truth. The truth of accountants.
Is that what he said?
That's part of what he said. It was a longer thing. I think he was talking about all of these different documentary filmmakers, and it was really interesting. I think Errol Morris might have been there, and I mean, Werner Herzog is like clearly brilliant because I feel like whenever he speaks, it's just these like amazing little jewels of like speech. But he called the Cinema Verite guy his enemy. He's like, you know, I try to achieve this static truth, ecstatic truth, but the Cinema Verite guy is his enemy because the Cinema Verite guy is just, you know, he's like an accountant filmmaker. Like he just
right.
Anyway, I'm like completely butchering this whole entire thing, so maybe we can cut this part. But it was.
I think there's enough there. I think we can.
Yeah, it'll be homework for the listener to find this like amazing quote.
All right. Well, let's try to quickly touch on motivation, which I know we talked a little bit about in our of math games and or of mechanics and math games episode, but yeah, I don't know. What did you think about this chapter?
I thought it was very interesting. The thought of. I feel like Maslow's hierarchy of needs just comes up in so many different contexts. And I don't know. I don't know if it's that I kind of don't believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or I think it's not that I don't believe in it, but I just think it's a very simplistic framework for contextualizing things. And thinking of games as sort of providing these needs to people, it was interesting to me. And I definitely was, I was thinking of certain games that people, kind of famously spend a lot of time on. Like, for example, World of Warcraft, where just with this one game, you're getting a lot of these needs, like this feeling of success, this feeling of camaraderie and community. And you're kind of like, within a video game, you're like fulfilling, kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I thought that was pretty interesting. But I also think in a lot of cases, this is kind of an oversimplification of it. Like, I don't think I'm fulfilling any basic human needs when I'm playing games most of the time. Like, I think I'm just kind of, I need to kill a couple hours, so I fire up a game.
It's interesting because when I've been looking at the pyramid as you've been talking and just trying to challenge myself, like, could a game supply or help supply these needs or I don't know, quell, I'm not sure what the right verb I want to use there is, but meet the need,
Yeah, quench a thirst.
quench the thirst for, and basically what I think I've arrived at is like the top three layers, which is love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization. That's where games come in. You know, the ones underneath are like safety and security and like literally physiological needs. Like you gotta go to the bathroom and like you gotta go to like eat something. I feel like those two, I really don't think a game is ever going to be able to supply any of those.
Yeah.
And I was kind of on the fence about the third one, which is love and belonging. But when you get into, you know, you talk about WoW, it's like that can be your community. People have started relationships, started like romantic relationships on WoW.
Absolutely.
So like, I think you're getting at that point, especially when you have this place for you to try to connect with other people.
And you know, he mentions like games are not important, which is funny because, you know, when you think of it in the cosmic sense, like nothing is important. And, you know, I think that society, or at least my perception, is that we kind of like look down on people who achieve some of these things through games, like achieving real community and like love. I don't believe this, but at least this is my perception through like Reddit or whatever, is like, oh, those people are nerds. But at the same time, it's like, you know, quote unquote ordinary people are on dating websites or something.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, I don't know, like everything is gamified these days. And I think if anything, games are becoming more and more important to culture. And maybe there will be one day where like within the context of a game, you can kind of like live this entire hierarchy of needs. Also, something I thought of while you were talking is some games do have that like basic survival aspect to them. You know, like there's games where you like crash land on a deserted island or something and you have to like build a house for yourself. And I do wonder if that's sort of some weird triggering of like this innate desire to like build shelter for yourself. Like obviously you're not like really satisfying that need for your own corporeal form, but you're getting the pleasure of like satisfying that need for this fake, you know, video game character. And I wonder if that has this weird, you know, satisfaction in the brain.
Dude, I think our game is perfectly positioned to like have like literally you win when you get self-actualization. Like we could just like have a Maslow's hierarchy of needs on the board.
Yeah, it just
and it's
slowly
like,
builds up.
yeah, and like you land and you like literally like you could wind up losing, like, yes, presumably you have like the first two tiers kind of, but like it's like temporary. And like if you don't build a shelter for yourself, like you lose that first tier. And like if you somehow run out of food, like you lose that second tier. So
Yeah.
it's like, or you, sorry, I mean like backwards, but like
I mean, that would be interesting. We could like really, you know, fall back on using Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
well, and yeah, maybe that's like, I don't know, nerdy, but and we probably wouldn't want to do that so explicitly, but this is one question we need to answer: is what does the success state look like? And I don't think we have that well defined yet. So
Yeah, we need to figure that out soon.
yeah, but this is something we'll, you know, because you know we talked about our prototype, and I think we don't need to have what the final state is defined for us to play around with the prototype. I think, you know.
Yeah. We should do
so-
a session, and we can even record it. I don't know if that would
Yeah.
be interesting, but like we literally fire up Tabletop Simulator, we bounce a ton of ideas back and forth. We make some actual physical representations of this game with tokens and tiles and things like that.
Maybe we can record that as a video as well, where we'll release it as a podcast, but there's a THKP YouTube channel, and then we can put it there too.
Yeah, we need to do more
I think that'd be
videos
fun.
for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that can be our next episode. I'd love to do that.
That sounds super fun. Yeah, I would absolutely love that. Well,
So-
I'm impressed with us. We kind of achieved coverage of 3 chapters,
Yeah.
which has been historically difficult for us. We didn't fully cover chapter 11, but maybe we can talk a little bit about it next time.
I think we got the spirit of it. I think, I guess there's obviously a ton more about motivation that we could cover, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think, we don't want to, we need to leave something for the readers we don't want to take all of the content.
Right. Read the book.
Yeah. Go read the book. Don't sue us, Jesse Show. All right. But then let's wrap it up there. Another successful episode. Switch statement.
Switch.
Switch statement.
Yeah, no, definitely successful episode. This was really fun, and I'll see you soon.
See you next time.
Bye.